Hi everyone, welcome. My name's Steph and I'm a recruiter within the Analytics and Sales program at Bloomberg. So I'm currently based in the European headquarters in London. I've been working at the company for just under 4 years, and in that time I've probably screened over 1,000 pre-recorded video interviews. So hopefully I'll be of some use of you today whenever we talk about what a PRVI is and how best to succeed whenever you complete one. I'm also joined by my colleague Mira, who's currently in the Paris office. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Steph. Yes, so as Steph said, I'm very lucky to be in our Paris office at the moment on a sales trip, but I myself am in analytics. So I'm part of the program that Steph does her recruiting for. I was an intern at Bloomberg 2 years ago now, and I had to do the classic pre-recorded video interview, not just for Bloomberg, but for some other places as well. Sorry, Steph. Before being recruited, I started full-time in November. So after finishing my last year of uni and then going traveling for a couple months in analytics, and then I specialized in fixed income and portfolio management theory. So that's what I'm doing just now. I'm about to move to sales in October. So I've been at the company for just under a year before I move to sales, and we can talk a little bit about the pathway later if that's of interest. But for now, I'll hand back to Steph to get started.
Great, thank you, Mira. So yes, we will be going through a presentation about. Oh. Sorry, I think my microphone went there for a second. As I mentioned, we will go through an agenda of how you can best succeed whenever you complete a pre-recorded video interview. But of course, if you have any questions, or I would love for it to be interactive, so I might ask a few questions throughout the presentation. Please feel free to pop your comments or your questions into the question box, and either Mira or myself will be able to answer them throughout the presentation or at the end. So, as I mentioned, we will be going through some of the sections you can see above. So what really is a pre-recorded video interview, and why does everyone seem to use them now whenever they are searching for candidates in the early careers spectrum? As well, Mira will be able to impart some of her knowledge and experience from having completed some of these before and give you some tips and tricks whenever you venture on to do them yourself. And then we'll also talk about the types of questions you can expect in most of the pre-recorded video interview templates that we see nowadays. And then last but not least, I'll quickly cover the STAR method, which helps people be very efficient and concise whenever they're answering those types of questions. But before we move on to that, I'm going to shamelessly plug the company that we work at. So let's give that question box a try. Is anyone aware of what Bloomberg is famous for? Pop it in the question box if you know the answer. So maybe no one's, oh, the terminal. Yes, thanks, Juicy. Okay, so maybe we have an audience that aren't aware too much of Bloomberg yet, but in a couple of slides, hopefully you'll a little bit more. So the guy on the right side of this picture is Mike Bloomberg, who is the person who founded Bloomberg. Back in the 1980s, he was a successful salesperson, and he was doing well in life. He was made redundant from his company and decided to take his knowledge of the financial markets, and he really found a gap in the markets. So at the time, back in 1981, there wasn't much transparency in the financial markets, and making a trade might take weeks. You may have to rely on what you've heard over the phone, so not very consistent. Mike saw that opportunity and created the Bloomberg Terminal, which is still around today. And what the Bloomberg Terminal does is provide transparent, real-time data to many financial individuals across the world, and it helps them to make those financial decisions. So you can also see on the on the left-hand side of the screen, different iterations of the Bloomberg terminal and what it looked like from at the very beginning. So moving on to cultural values. These are the important values that we really align ourselves with in Bloomberg. And why I thought this was important to mention to you in this presentation is that you'll see a lot of companies ask questions in their interviews, pre-recorded, virtual or in-person interviews, that align back to the cultural values. And I think this is something that Bloomberg places a lot of importance on. So if you join the company, you'll notice that you're evaluated each year on how you live by these 4 values, as well as if you go through the interview process, you will be evaluated on these 4 values as well. And why are these so important? Well, you've seen what the terminal looked like back in the 1980s. If we hadn't continued to collaborate with each of our teams within the company and continued to innovate, we probably wouldn't be around. People would have found a better way to find their financial data. So it's always about continuously evolving. And again, knowing your customer. Obviously, it's important in a role like Mira's, which is analytics and sales, dealing with clients every day. But again, in Bloomberg, every person that works in the company prides themselves on how they treat our customers. For example, myself, I treat everyone on this call today like my client, and I want to give you the best possible service that I can. And then last but not least, doing the right thing. So that can mean, as a data company, providing reliable data to our clients, but also we place a huge importance on philanthropies within Bloomberg. So I'm not sure if anyone feels brave enough to have a guess at this, but does anyone think that they can guess approximately how many percentage of our profits last year we gave back to worthy causes? So percentage. 30, 15, a little bit higher than Tuzo's answer, so higher than 60. 80, yeah, so it's actually more than 80. I think it's around 85%, but that's how much the Bloomberg company donates to worthy causes outside of its profits. So not only are you coming to work to work hard and do well, every day you can leave the company and know that you've done well for yourself, done well for the company, but also helped to help worthy causes across the world. So that was a little bit about Bloomberg, and hopefully that's piqued your interest. If you want to find out any more, you can check out information on our career site. But we will move into the presentation now. So what is a pre-recorded video interview? On the chat, can anyone let me know, have they done a pre-recorded video interview before? How did you find it? Yes, Sarah, yes, it was awkward. A little bit tricky at first. Thank you, Muriel. So yeah, a pre-recorded video is what it says on the tin. So it's a one-way interview where you usually receive an invite to complete in your own time, and you see questions on the screen and you answer them back. And usually there's a minute to 2 minutes of time to answer those questions. And I can see Matthew's put in the chat box, it was daunting. And to be honest, Matthew, having screened over 1,000 PRVIs myself, whenever I had to complete one for a volunteering project, I found it daunting. So it can be a little bit strange because you're not able to see what the person who's watching the video feels. Have you answered the question right? Have you gone completely wrong? But this is what Mira and I hope that our tips and tricks will help to make it less daunting. And of course, pre-recorded video interviews can be really useful. So first of all, it can be more efficient on your side. You can pick a time that suits you best and where you feel comfortable to do it. As well, most pre-recorded video interviews comprise of standardized questions. So you know you're going into an interview where you're getting asked the same questions as everyone else, and it's much more fair. So I'm going to pass on to Mira now to talk through her experience and some tips and tricks.
Great, thank you so much, Steph. Yes, so I'll go through some of the things that will hopefully help you, and everything that you guys are saying in the chat, I can 100% relate. So having done the interviews, pre-recorded interviews myself, I know that feeling of just thinking, oh, it's super awkward, or oh, this is really difficult to kind of, you don't have another person there to give you the feedback that you would get in a real life situation. And I totally understand how hard that can be. But as Steph said, there are loads of benefits specifically for recruiters, and actually also for applicants, although it might not seem like it, that can really help as well. So first off, I'll just go through some of the basic tips on how to make it. How to make a good first impression with a pre-recorded video interview. So the first thing I would say is don't do what I have done now in having a really kind of rubbish camera setup. I'm so sorry, everyone, that you can basically not see my face. So do the complete opposite. If you basically, what we want is something like Steph, like clear camera, just of your face, just speaking, just you speaking to the camera. We want it to be just quiet, so there's no distractions around. So there's no one, like your mum's not coming into your room halfway through, which actually happened to me once during one of mine. And there's no other distractions going on. Also good just to check. I mean, I think all of us having lived through the age of COVID, we've all probably got a good idea of our camera setups in familiar places. So I would always say, like, use one of them in a place that you know that your camera and microphone are going to be reliable. As with this, I would also say, like, just check exactly what your camera can sort of see, what the screen can see before you start. So either hop on a Zoom call with a friend, or do something similar like that to test it out, so that you can see where you have to dress smart until. So you need to, from here up, usually business appropriate, and then you can wear your pajamas underneath, but just don't tell anyone, and make sure that you can't see it in the camera. As for that, once you're doing this, there are so many aspects that are like real life interview. Body language is one of the big things. Even though you might feel like you can't get a lot back from the screen itself, like you would with a normal interview situation, that doesn't mean that you should change how you act by default as well. So what I would say is try not to look at your face while you're doing your pre-recorded video interview. It can be super tempting to just be staring at the icon of your own face, as opposed to actually looking at the camera and engaging and trying to sort of make it as real as possible. Something to help with that is, I would say, to put, if you have notes that you make for your interview, like while you're reading the question and like during your note time, put them on Post-it notes, and then you can stick them right either side of your webcam, and it makes it so much easier to look like you're really invested and you're still remaining focused, while also able to get prompts and not have to feel like you're going elsewhere. With that, also try to keep your notes really concise. My main tip for doing a pre-recorded video interview would be, from my own experience, would be, don't try and figure out exactly what you're going to say. If you have a minute and a half to record your response, that doesn't mean you need to record a minute and a half long speech about everything you know, like regurgitating everything you know about the company and everything about you. If they've asked you a specific question, try and really understand that question, and then everything that you need to say should be able to be said in 3 to 5 bullet points that you can put on a little note, and then you can elaborate as and when you'd like to. I would also say, just try and be as sorry, I think I'm just about to have some tech issues. Try not to have that happen. Yes, so just try and be yourself. Try and like show as much of your personality as you can. So I think you guys can probably tell from me that I'm very chatty, and I'm quite outgoing. Try and show that. If those are your skills, your interpersonal skills, there is definitely a way for you to make that be put across. One thing I was going to say, from one of the questions in the chat, before from Charlotte, about speaking long enough, don't worry about it. I would say as long as you feel like you've answered the question, you don't need to speak for the full time that's given to you. Matthew, about your question just there, sorry, just to make it a bit interactive so I can answer while we're going along. Don't worry, it's probably not essential, but maybe just stick on a shirt for the next ones. It also depends on what kind of job you're applying to, and things like that. But just, but also on the other hand, it's good to be comfortable so that you can really show yourself as you are. So, in terms of the questions that you're going to be expected to be able to ask, this is about you, but it's also about you in the position that you are applying for. So what you need to show in this short time is how much work you've actually done. So therefore, if you've done a pre-recorded video interview for one company, that doesn't mean that you can, even though the questions might be similar, that doesn't mean that you can still use the exact same responses for another company's pre-recorded video interview. So it's like the same with applications. You are 100 times more likely to get far with an application that you've actually spent proper time on, rather than firing out 10 in an hour. Exactly the same thing goes for a pre-recorded video interview. Put in the work and you'll get the maximum payoff, I would say. What do I mean by this is, well, it's sort of mainly focused on the company and the role. So just even if you get some stuff wrong, that's okay. I didn't really know what the Bloomberg terminal was when I first started applying, but I researched it. I watched The Big Short and The Wolf of Wall Street, which I count as pretty good homework. And I researched it a lot, and then researched as much as I could about the company and found the things that mattered to me. If you're trying to fire off chat about something that you don't really care about, or that you're not as interested in, or you don't really know that much about, it will be transparent and you'll be able to see. So with that, for example, in my case, I found when talking about Bloomberg company culture in my pre-recorded video interview, I had read something about Bloomberg philanthropies, like Steph was talking about earlier, and that was something that actually really resonated with me. The specific example, I think, was it was just after COVID, and Bloomberg philanthropies were working on a project for funding in arts education, so like music education, and just funding in general. And that was something that was really close to my heart. And so by finding a way in and a connection, I was much more convincing. I mean, Steph probably saw my pre-recorded video interview and I dread to think what it was like. But I hope was much more convincing and much more lively and much more myself. Sometimes as well, you'll have things like competence tests. So if it's a problem-solving situation, I think, again, the best advice with that sort of thing is, rather than just thinking, oh, what would they want me to say, just say what you would actually do in that situation, because that will determine whether you are actually a good fit for the company that you're applying for. If you think like, oh, you've just got to say the right buzzwords and answer the questions in a certain way, to an extent, obviously, like, buzzwords are important. They show that you've done your work, but also don't try and answer something in a way that you wouldn't actually follow up on at all, because 9 times out of 10 you won't be able to argue why that's the right thing to do, and it will be obvious that that's not what you would want to do, and probably won't even be the right answer. And then finally, the last question about where you see yourself in the future. I think I find this question personally to be one of the hardest ones I've ever had. It's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, sort of thing. And the temptation can always be to say, oh, I'll be working at Bloomberg and I'll be doing all of this and stuff. It's like, you don't have to say that. You can, again, all of this, my main tip is just be yourself. And also, if you don't know, just say you don't know. Don't ever be scared to admit that you don't know something. Just like, I want to do this, I want to do this. These are my aspirations and these are my hopes. And you can tailor it to show how this would align well with the company that you're trying to work for. So like, in my future, in 5 years, I hope to be making a difference by doing X, Y, Z, etc. I hope that was helpful. I'll answer just a couple of questions that are happening in the chat just now before I hand back to Steph, if that's okay, Steph? Great, perfect. So, so let's go back to Charlotte. Yes. Oh, sorry, Steph.
Maybe I noticed a few themes within the chat, and I'd just like to clear them up as someone who watches a lot of the pre-recorded videos. So someone mentioned about a tire that they had, excuse me, sorry, that's a slight tech issue, that someone hadn't worn a suit to the interview. Don't worry about that. That's not really what we would say, because sometimes you wouldn't wear a suit to an interview, but it's more so in the fact that sometimes we've seen people slouched over a chair in their pajamas or looking very unprofessional, and that obviously, even if you try not to, that does cause a bad impression. It shows that you haven't, you know, put much thought or put much preparation into how yourself is going to appear. Then someone else mentioned about them feeling it was difficult to fill the time with an answer. Again, with some of the practice and of some of the tips and tricks that Mira has imparted, I think that should be more helpful, that you should really try and think, these are the questions that will be asked, and this is how I can already have anecdotes ready, I can already prepare a little bit. But again, sometimes it's better to be concise and try and get your point across rather than to fill the time with buzzwords. And that's what I actually do see a lot, is usually we would prescribe 1 minute 30 to a question, and people end up not being able to get the point across and being stopped before they even finish the sentence. And of course, in most jobs, not just jobs at Bloomberg, communication skills is one of those competencies that we check for. So really being able to be clear in your answers. And I have got a great slide in a couple of minutes that we can go in so that you can help to work on that if that's something that you struggle with. And then I did see another person mention in the chat with regards to that it was hard to try and produce and remember the script as soon as possible. So yes, with pre-recorded video interviews, usually you're giving it like a set amount of time. You read the answer, maybe you get a minute to gather your thoughts, and then you answer the question. Some pre-recorded video interviews that you have an unlimited amount of time. But what I would urge everyone not to do is to have scripted answers. So again, as Mira mentioned, have your bullet points, make sure that you know what you want to talk about, but don't have scripted answers, because this is where many candidates fall down whenever I review them, is that I can't get a feel for their authentic self. They're regurgitating an answer that they've read off the website, which anyone could do. And in nowadays, a lot of people are popping the question into ChatGPT and regurgitating ChatGPT's answer, which is pretty innovative. But again, ChatGPT is not evolved enough to give correct answers for some of these questions. So you're effectively answering it incorrectly, whereas if you'd thought about it yourself, maybe you would have been able to answer it correctly and be able to show a bit of your personality. So try not to be too scripted. Again, the worst thing that I've seen is whenever people have glasses on and I can see in the reflection of their glasses that they're reading off of the screen, and or their eyes move from side to side. That just shows me that, you know, they lean too heavily on other resources rather than try to answer it themselves. And then buzzwords again. Buzzwords are great, but also you should have some depth to your answers. So if you're going to say something, really try to align it back to your experience, or as Mira mentioned with regards to Bloomberg Philanthropies, be able to talk about, hey, I've actually read this about the company and it shows that you've done research. So those are the main themes that I've seen in the chat. Mira, anything else that you would like to tackle?
No, you've said everything perfectly. Just reiterating exactly what I said. Just yeah, just be yourself, like be your authentic self, and try and make the connections. So when we talk about understanding the company, we don't want, as Steph said, just a regurgitated answer straight from the company website. What we want is for you to demonstrate that you've understood what that actually means. So for example, like, oh, Bloomberg Philanthropies had X number, like 85% of profit. Like, it's great that you know that, but how does that relate to you? How does that relate to you in this role? So you've understood. A better example would be, Bloomberg, from what I know, Bloomberg has a very heavy involvement in philanthropy, which is something that really interests me because of my time spent volunteering for XYZ, which taught me XYZ. I'm not sure if, given my answers right now, Steph would still give me a job, but hopefully the point is coming across. And also, just one wee tip that I wanted to add. If you are worried about not having enough time to formulate a good answer and response, in the time window that you get to prepare, so when you read the question, what I used to do was really quickly write down the question, or like write down the keywords and then write down my bullet points. So if everything went wrong and I completely forgot all the things that I wanted to say, I always had something to fall back on.
Thank you, Mira, and I 100% would definitely still give you a job. I think everyone's too hard on themselves video interviews. And I see a few little themes here in the chat about AI. So for Bloomberg, we screen our pre-recorded video interviews. It will be myself or someone in my team who'll watch those interviews. So definitely, as human in Bloomberg, yes, there are different companies that do use AI to screen the pre-recorded video interviews. So that does happen in today's world, but not at Bloomberg. So I think whenever it comes to pre-recorded video interviews, I think Mia touched upon it earlier on, this is your first round interview. This typically is the first round interview, and you're going to get questions that really try and understand why you've applied to this company and that specific role. And again, if you're in the early years of your career, you're probably going to be shooting off a few different applications to a few different companies. And I think my biggest piece of advice whenever it comes to applying for any company is really try and make your answers aligned to that specific company. So don't try and make it a one size fits all cover letter or application or interview, because it's very easy to tell as a recruiter. And it also doesn't really show much research on the specific company. So before you go into your first round interview, whether it's pre-recorded or otherwise, I would do lots of research on the company, because you should expect to have a lot of questions based off of that knowledge. So really get to know the role, the department, the team that you've applied to, what skills they require. And where you can do that is go and have a look at the job advert. Usually this is how you find out about a job. You'll see a job advert. It will briefly discuss the role. And usually at the end, it will say, we would like you to have, or you need to have. So if it lists bullet points there, look at those bullet points and try and write an anecdote or a line that relates back to your experience, your skill set, and how it aligns with that competency or skill. And that's already going to help you be able to say, hey, I know within the financial solution team, you look for people who've got great communication and they're also problem solvers. This is a time whenever I, was faced with an obstacle, and this is how I resolved it. And in today's world, with many of the larger companies who hire multiple people, we usually have great career sites. If you type in Bloomberg careers or any other big company careers, you're going to go onto a website that has loads of posts, loads of articles, loads of information, videos that you can go and have a watch and understand the role better, understand the company better. And that really is the best way to get to understand what job you've applied to and what the company's like. And then definitely at Bloomberg, this is a big yes in our books. We highly encourage you to try and network with people from the business. So we host lots of events. We host our Discover events. We go to lots of universities. So we actively encourage you to try and register for some of those events. Again, most other large companies do the same thing. So really, it's great if you try to come to an event. If you're unable to come to an event, maybe you're not located in some of those areas, that's totally fine. Try and leverage LinkedIn and look up people who are currently doing the job that you would like to do. And a lot of the times you can reach out to them on LinkedIn and they're happy to have a chat and help you on your journey to applying. So really leverage the network whichever way you can. The next bullet point I added in myself because I am to interviews. I always have been. I get a little bit nervous. So you really should always try and practice, whether it's in the mirror whether it's using a microphone and recording yourself, or if you've got a friend or someone who'll listen to you. It's always good to try and practice those answers. So maybe the first time it doesn't come out the way you would like it to, then you can try it again, and that just helps you get in the way. Again, try not to regurgitate answers, but it's nice to be able to understand what type of language you want to use and how you want to frame some answers to some of the typically asked questions. And last but not least, working in a company where I screen lots of CVs, watch lots of PRVIs every day. Again, just really understand, why do you want to work at this company? Why do you want to work in this role? And have your reasons ready. Because a lot of the times, again, we see people who have applied to 60 different companies and they have no true motivations, no authentic motivations to join the company. And if we're looking at 10 people who've got the same skill set, got the same experience, we're always going to go for someone who's able to use the examples that Mira mentioned, that they are really interested in Bloomberg's philanthropic actions, or perhaps it's initiatives that we've taken within our business commercial awareness. So really be able to think about that. That's going to help you in the interview process, but it's also going to be able to help you hone your career and hone your long-term trajectory. So moving on to the last slide, whenever it comes to having that impact in those pre-recorded video questions. So as mentioned, you usually get a certain amount of time. Someone in the chat mentioned that they get a bit nervous whenever they see the timer. I totally understand that. I feel the same way. But really, I think the best way to work on that, especially if you think that you're maybe slightly unsimplified, or maybe you feel like your answers are a little bit waffly, is to work on the STAR technique. So has anyone ever heard of the STAR technique before? Yes, thank you, Louisa. Yes, so the STAR technique is something that we really encourage people to use whenever they're practicing to do interviews at Bloomberg. You can see on the side, it's really about trying to frame your answer in these 4 ways. So what was the situation? What was the task? What was the action? And what was the result? So this method gives you structure to the examples you give to questions, and it works really well in interviews. So you can use it to highlight particular skills and qualities that you have that the employer is looking for. So really try and break those down. And I think in a lot of ways you want to answer, the STAR technique works. So definitely have a look at it now. Whenever we finish the webinar, please go and have a read through and try and practice it whenever you start to get ready to make applications. Yes, Youssef, I like it. Yes, is it worth adding the extra R reflection? That is so funny. My colleague did a presentation the other day and mentioned that she really loves to see it whenever people add the reflection as well. So yes, if you feel like you've mastered the STAR technique, adding the extra R, so situation, task, action and result, and then reflection. So how did you think it all went? What could have been done better? Definitely use that as well. But I'm keeping it simple now in case anyone hasn't used it before. If you're able to break it down into the 4 points, it still works really well. Perfect. So that is the end of our content, but I think we'll have a look through and see if there are any questions. If you feel like we haven't covered anything in the presentation, please, now is your time to ask questions in the
I'll just come in on one of them from earlier, from Zubair. I just wanted to say that about whether the motivation should be on the company level or whether it needs to be on a personal level. I think the goal is that you align the two. So it doesn't necessarily need to be, I'm really interested in philanthropy and so therefore I like Bloomberg. It doesn't need to be that simple, but as long as, if it's something, when you say something on a business level, I assume you mean something like, I want to work for the company that does this, that is the platform where the buy side and the sell side meet, and that has like the most amount of data of anyone else in the financial markets. Like that's a perfectly viable justification as well. It's just about making it just making it authentic. So if you're genuinely interested in that, you will be able to genuinely talk about that, and it won't necessarily seem like something separate. I hope that answered the question. If not, please ask another one.
Thanks, Mira. And I'm looking at the next question from Sureka. What is something that stands out positively when you're watching these hire views? Oh, I am a sucker for someone who's really engaged. So I love people who are enthusiastic and really able to translate that across a video camera. So people who make eye contact, people who do use hand gestures in moderation, as well as people who are able to talk specifically about the role. So that might sound a bit rudimentary, but I see a lot of people who come on to do the pre-recorded video interview, and let's say the first question is, what's the type of working environment you would like to work in? And they say fast-paced. And they don't even try to say, and I've read about Bloomberg, and in Bloomberg the culture is very fast-paced, that kind of thing. Or as Mira mentioned, the hardest question for her is long-term motivations. I'd say 90% of the answers that I see on that are, I want to be a manager, I want to manage people. And that really doesn't give me, doesn't let me really understand who you are as a person. So again, in that answer, you can try and break it down into what types of roles and what types of responsibilities would you like to have. It doesn't need to be a specific job, but what do you see yourself doing? What do you really enjoy doing? So yeah, someone who's really able to actively engage in the interview and come across as authentic. Tips on the cover letter. Oh, well, this is going outside of the pre-recorded video interview, but I will help, Louisa. In Bloomberg, we don't ask you to do a cover letter. For most of our roles, we ask you to do a question and answer instead, and that lets us ask really specific questions to determine if you're the right person for the role. But again, cover letter, I always say relate it back to the job description. So you've seen the advert, highlight the words that you think are important and try and relate those back into your cover letter. So it makes it easier for a recruiter to be able to go and say, I'm looking for a problem solver who has a passion for client service. I can see in Louisa's cover letter, she says that she loves solving problems. Here's an example, and she wants to work with clients in the future. Already that's ticked a box and made it easy for me to see that you're the right profile. Tuzu said, do you accept applications from international students? Yes. For most of our roles in Bloomberg, let's say analytics and sales, data engineering, we sponsor the right to work in our London offices. So that is not an issue. And I actually, sorry, in that, I remember someone mentioned, is it normal for people to ask in a pre-recorded video interview that do you have the right to work? We personally don't ask that in ours, but we do ask that question in our application process. That's for us because we sponsor visas. It's not an issue, but it's more on a timing basis. So if you've applied and you really want to start next month, if you need a visa, it's going to take a little bit longer than that. So it helps us plan our pipeline accordingly. So I'm pretty sure that's probably why they're asking that in other people's pre-recorded video interviews. Otherwise, maybe some roles are unable to accept people who do require help for right to work, but they should mention that in their job adverts before you do the pre-recorded video interview.
Can I just come in on a question from Oscar about doing an internship? Steph can probably say more about the recruiting process as it is now, but from my memory, it was a long application form, then a pre-recorded video interview, as with this one, and then I believe I had. I'm not sure if we did aptitude tests for analytics and sales, but I think there was some problem solving in the PRVI. Then I had I had 2 language test interviews because I speak 2 other languages, but I'm not a native speaker. So I had to be tested on those by a native speaker just to make sure that I was comfortable talking at a business level. And then I had an assessment day, which was, if you've ever done an assessment day with other places, it was sort of group project thing in the morning, and then another interview and a sales role play in the afternoon with some people from analytics, and a rep from analytics and a rep from sales. Then after that, I had one final interview after the assessment day. Again, this one was with an analytics team leader, so one of the managers in my department. Steph can tell you whether that's changed now, but that's how it was for me for the internship. I would say, Oscar, that like having an internship at Bloomberg has been, I mean, it was great. It was a really wonderful experience. Well, good enough that I came back full time. However, as far as recruitment goes, doing an internship and doing something like an insight week, even though the timeframes are completely different, it's my understanding that you're put on a fairly level playing field in terms of recruitment. So even if you've done the internship for 10 weeks, or if you've done an insight week for 2 weeks, at the end of that, you will still be evaluated on the same core principles that everyone else will be. Having done the internship obviously helps, because it means that if you choose to start full time, then you have a lot of contacts already in the business. You've got a really good idea of what your work is going to be like, and you've already got a really strong network, and you already know basically sort of what you're going into to an extent, and you can feel a little bit more comfortable in that. So if you can apply to do an internship at Bloomberg first, I would really recommend. For me particularly, it was something really good going into analytics from having done an internship, because I didn't study finance. I didn't come from a finance background at all. But because I had the internship, and we didn't have to for the internship, it meant that I was in a really good position coming into the full-time role as well. That being said, you do not have to have studied finance or anything for the full-time roles. Steph can probably elaborate more on that, but Bloomberg's culture is such that we will teach you everything that you need to know to be able to do the job well. What we look for is the skills that, even if you don't know everything about the financial markets, that's totally fine, as long as you're willing and you have the wish to learn, and you show your willingness to work hard and your interest in finance. That's all you really need. Everything else we teach, and then it's just about the person that you are, and that you show us that you are and you can be. Steph, if you want to follow up with anything from
Mia should be getting a job in the recruitment team. Fantastic answer. Yeah, exactly the same. So it was Oscar that asked the question about the internship. So as Mira mentioned it, the recruitment process is very similar. What we would say is, if you've applied and you're eligible for full-time, and I had screened your CV and I thought you were a good fit, I would probably give you a call or send you a message and say, hey, Oscar, why are you applying for the internship rather than the graduate role? Because our internship has a finite amount of headcount, and lots of people want to do the internships, it's actually probably a little bit more difficult to get the internship than it might be for a full-time role, or at least it's definitely on the same level, because you go through the same amount of process. So sometimes we get people who think, oh, I'm not good enough for a full-time role, but I'll maybe try the internship. Don't think that way. If we think you're good, we'll put you through the process either way. So that was the internship role. I have seen a couple of questions very specific to Bloomberg and what roles might be right for them. I would say I'm not going to answer those on the chat on the webinar today, simply because this should be framed a little bit more around pre-recorded video interviews. But please check out our career site. I spend a lot of time working on it, so I want you to go on out, and I think you'll find it very useful. But the next question I've seen, a few people mentioned about stutters. Stutters. Would we judge that in any way? Not at all. Don't worry about it. There's many people within the business who suffer from a stutter. Sometimes even I get a little bit tongue-tied. I would not have any bias on that whatsoever. If you had any additional needs that you think the PRVI couldn't accommodate, usually there's a recruitment contact for most companies that you can send them an email and say, hey, can you make reasonable adjustments to help me be as successful as possible? And most companies are very happy to do so. But again, if you make a stutter or if you make a little blooper, don't worry. we all do it, as long as you carry yourself professionally and say excuse me and get back into it. That's totally fine. Awkward timing. I think Mira mentioned this, but with regards to filling an awkward silence, if you find that there is an awkward silence, it's probably better just to finish the question rather than to kind of waffle and say stuff that you don't think will have impact to the answer. So it's fine to finish the answer a minute rather than a minute and a half. But again, try and prepare. A lot of these questions are very typical, so you should be able to prepare a few bullets on each of them. And someone mentioned, will they be able to access the recording? I think the Target Jobs team will be able to confirm this, but as far as I'm aware, yes, you will be able to access the recording if you want to go back and have a read through or hear some of Mira's and I's tips. I'm just checking, Mira, any other questions that I have missed?
I'm looking through the chat just now, and it all looks good. Just as Steph said, if you're asking about sort of specific roles and things like that, there's definitely really good resources that Steph and the team have been working on that you can go and have a look at. So we maybe won't answer those questions here, but if you've got any last sort of questions or thoughts about the pre-recorded video interview thing, please send them our way.
I can see Alex Lau's question. So from the perspective of, apologies, my microphone keeps going off. When you identified applicants who could communicate reasonably well, as in they did not stutter, have body language and eye contact, utilize the STAR technique, what would be the extra elements that make an applicant stand out from them? So just bear in mind, we would not fault anyone who has a stutter. Whenever it comes to body language, it just looks better. Sometimes we see people swinging in the chair or looking out the window or reading off a screen. Again, that we wouldn't reject you just off of that, but it always helps to make the impression better. But as I mentioned previously, just really try and do your research, be able to show and articulate your interest in the company and in the role that you've applied to. That really makes a PRVI stand out. And Zubair, is it okay if we take pauses in between to think and structure our answer instead of planning everything at the start? Yes, please. I'd much rather you take a second, take 10 seconds, really think about the question, similar to an in-person interview, and make sure it's structured. Because yes, we do get a lot of people who come and have no structure, and then again it loses impact. They're not able to get the answer that they wanted across because they haven't spent enough time thinking about how they want to frame it. And Nora, if you can't remember a situation to talk about, show us an example. How would you answer the interview question? So by situation, yes, it shows situation here, but really the STAR technique can be applied in very many ways. So it doesn't need to be a specific situation. It could be an experience or maybe a project that you completed. I think if you struggle to think of the situation, then you probably just need to practice it on your end. So if you've found questions in the past that you've really struggled to put into that format, go and try and do some practice questions. On the internet, there's lots of really useful resources to get you into the way of practicing those answers and be able to kind of formulate them in the way that you think has the most impact. And again, it happens with everyone. The first time, there's a phrase, what is it? Nobody's first time is perfect, but you need to do the first time to make it to the hundredth time where it is perfect. So practice makes perfect. So really just, if you do struggle in those scenarios, just try and use the resources that are provided to you and work on it. As you can tell, my answers are a little unstructured at the moment as well. Well, I think we've answered most of the questions. Sorry, I seen Dang's question. I did a video interview and the final question was, is there anything you would want to say with us? Which advice would you recommend to answer this question? So yes, This is a great question. Usually I haven't seen it in a pre-recorded video interview, but sometimes maybe people want you to summarize yourself and how best you fit into the role. Maybe in an interview, if you're on a face-to-face interview virtually or in person, you may be asked, do you have any questions you would like to ask the interviewers? This is a great way to show that you've researched the company. So really try and think of meaningful questions. You know, sometimes people say, how much does this job pay? Or what are my hours of work going to be? That doesn't really apply to Bloomberg, but someone may say, hey, I've read an article that Bloomberg has created its own chat GPT. Can you talk me through how you think that may evolve in my role? Or, you know, what's your favorite part of your role? Or what do you think is the area of development that you see most people who join the customer support role face? So questions that show that you have thought about the company, that you're interested, are really important to show that you are motivated. So that would be if you're in a person interview and they ask you if you've got questions at the end. I hope I've answered that correctly.
I'll just come in on Avinash's question about describing a challenging task you've encountered and whether it has to be technical if you're applying for a technical role. I think there isn't a standard answer to this one. It's going to be really situation specific. If it's a sort of a question like that where you can say a challenging task, I would say that it's equally viable as long as you can show that you overcame the challenge, to say, when I was a waitress working in a restaurant and this was particularly challenging and I did this, and this to overcome it, because it still shows like who you are and how you tackle problems, as it would be to say, I had a really difficult, when I was writing my thesis, I had something like this particular part of my project was extremely difficult and we had to do this, and this. So I would say it's super situation dependent. I don't think necessarily, but obviously that's yeah, it's your call. But I would say as a general, probably not. Steph, do you agree? Or?
Yes, I agree. Sorry, I'm just checking my microphone. Yes, I do agree. So there will be, depends on what role you apply to, but sometimes there will be technical assessments, but they will let you know this is a technical assessment. So if it was, then yes, you may have to do like a process re-engineering task where you actually work through a workflow to find efficiencies. But most of the time, it's going to be really just to see how you handle a problem, how you're able to deal with obstacles. So it could be working in a restaurant, working in a group at uni, doing your dissertation. It could be whenever you started a job and there was an issue. And again, a lot of people think that they have to be perfect. It's much better, even if you say, hey, I made a mistake or something went wrong, to show that you had resilience and that you've shown reflection on how things can go better, also works really well in an interview. So it's good to show sometimes things don't go right and how you handle them. So I'm just reading Ivy Rose's question. So I think, Ivy Rose, the main, like a summary of your question is that you're new to this world of applying to graduate roles and internships, and that it's a little bit overwhelming. Again, I would say if that is the case, really just try and work on some of the tips that we've provided today. So look, the internet has so many useful resources. If it's a specific company that you're really interested in, there's lots of information on the company sites. There are also many groups. So if you're interested in tech, there's many groups on the internet that can help you prepare for those types of interviews. And again, LinkedIn's very useful. If you have a specific career or a specific industry, then please feel free to reach out to those people who do the job of your dreams and have a chat with them, see what they say. And doing that preparation is going to help you whenever it comes to actually submitting applications for an internship or a graduate scheme. And then we'll take one more question, as I'm pretty sure Mira has a busy day of visiting clients after this. I'll take, so I'm going to try and merge Sophie and Henri's question together. So motivations for joining a specific company whenever there's lots of alternatives. And Sophie mentioned that how hard is it to get a job within business and finance if you've not studied that specific role? So again, it's just really being able, in both those answers, it's about making sure that you're able to articulate your motivations. So at Bloomberg, I think, Mira, did you mention, I can't remember what you studied, but we do hire lots of people who haven't necessarily studied a finance degree, but if they've applied to a role that is based within the financial markets or within the financial services, you should be able to articulate why you're interested in that. Have you studied an extracurricular course? Do you keep up to date with the financial news? In what way have you been able to prove that you're even interested in finance, and make sure if it's in an application, if it's in a video interview, that you relate that back. And again, to Henri's question, making sure that you're able to specify your motivations for whichever company you're specifically applying to. So for the role that I recruit, I may ask you, why do you want to choose financial services instead of an investment bank? And I would expect you to be able to answer that. So being able to specify why specifically you wanted to apply to this company, this role, this sector. Okay, I hope that has helped. Mira, any last thoughts from your side?
No, just to reiterate everything you just said for Sophie and Henri there. I would like to just reiterate. I studied modern languages at university, so something completely unrelated to what I'm doing now, other than the fact that I'm in Paris, so I have to speak French with some of my clients. But so Sophie, don't worry about that. I would say Bloomberg is one of the good ones in terms of like really nurturing the culture of learning once you're already in the role. So we expect you to have the right skills. However, we will teach you everything that you need to know to do the job well. So I think just like it doesn't matter what your background is, because everyone can and does even out in the learning process. And you want to find a company, trust me guys, you want to find a company that will invest in you in this way, because it's been a fantastic experience for me so far. And Steph didn't have to tell me to say that. That's really coming from me. So yes. And Henri, finally, just your last thing about when there's like good alternatives. Every company is going to have competitors, so you have to think about if you're applying to Bloomberg over one of our competitors, why are you applying to us? Is it because we're the main market player for what we do, or is it because of our philanthropies? Is it because we also are a massive news provider? Is it because of the cachet and the history of the company? There are so many reasons, and you need to find out what makes this company stand out and why you actually want to work there. Which goes back to my earlier point of just making sure you're really researching and not just using the same generic answers for 10 different things. So yes, if that's everything, then thank you so much everyone for tuning in. And Steph's right, I've got to run away and go and see some clients now. But thanks so much, and I hope it was helpful.
Thanks everyone. Hope you found it informative and engaging. And of course, if you want to find, you can do so by going onto our company website. Have a great day.